Hi, Pastor Jared here with another book review, and this is a book that is a fairly old book. It's a hard book to get a hold of, but I really, really appreciate it. And it is How to Disciple Your Children by Walter A. Henrichsen. And Walt Henrichsen, a lot of people know him from Navigators, big in discipleship. He is one of the few men that I wish I would have gotten a chance to know. Unfortunately, in 2016, he went to go be with the Lord. But he is a man who has written a lot of books. One of the most famous books he's written is Disciples Are Made, Not Born. And one of the things that I'm excited to say that uh, I have only a very, very minor contact, very indirect. I met one of his mentors, Bob Wheeler, who he mentions briefly in Disciples Are Made Not Born. But in that book, and so I got to meet his mentor that mentored him, but unfortunately, I got to meet Walter himself. Uh, but I want to say I read this book, and they actually had this to read at seminary. And I mean, even though this book is really, it's not. There's no new books in print. The one cup I had was a 16th printing, and it was printed in 1987. Um, uh, and you can still find it. If you go online, you can still find this book. I highly read it. It's, as you can see, it's a very small book, but I like how simple it is as it talks about discipling your children and reminds us as parents that you are the primary discipler in your children's life. It's actually not the church per se. It's not even in the youth pastor, which unfortunately put too much uh, dependence on the youth pastor or youth ministry of the church. Really, you, the parent, are the primary discipler of your children. And this book is excellent. It really gives you the foundations of how you, as a parent, can be a disciple of your children. And it keeps it simple and straight. It's one of the things I've always appreciated about Walter's book is he's simple and direct and to the point, easy to read for any parent. And just kind of go through the um, I want to read the back here. It says this. Um, it has a couple questions in the back. It starts off with, what is a parent's most important job? What is it? Is it to make a lot of money? Is it to make sure your kids have a lot of fun? What's the purpose? And the answer is discipling his own children. That is the most important job as a parent. The second one says, what is discipling? Great question. What is it? A lot of times we talk about discipling and discipling the next generation, but what is it? And it answers that one person imparting his life to another in a close relationship. And that's really true. Discipleship is one on one. It's a lot of what Jesus did, where you had Jesus and the disciples followed after him, and they walked quite literally, followed after him, talked with, interacted, dialogue. It is a life on life relationship, and it is Jesus imparted his understanding of the kingdom and about God, and Jesus imparting his wisdom and knowledge and understanding and his life onto his disciples so that they could, when Jesus would, after his death, burial, and resurrection, and he ascends to heaven, that they knew how to live out the life because they had Jesus set the pattern for them. And as parents, that is our job. Our job was to set the pattern. How do we want our kids to live? How do we want them to live their lives? And is your job to impart your life to your children and be a model for them to follow after? And so it's a great question. And then it goes on, we as parents mark our children for eternity. It's really true. How we represent Jesus Christ through example, instruction, discipline, and in the crisis of life is decisive in the process. In this book, Walter Henderson uncovers and explores a biblical principle on avoiding the negative aspects of child rearing, and he also makes practical suggestions that leads toward positive results. Um, it is a great book. He divides the book. The first chapter, he talks about is define the task. What is this idea of discipleship? The second chapter is it's a sin to be born aboard. It's sin to be bored kids with the gospel. It's a sin. Your kids who know the gospel should not be bored by it. It should be exciting. It should be adventurous. It should be everything that we want, that we see in movies. We want to be on adventure. The gospel should not be boring. Um, Parents set the example, and we already talked about it. You are the example they will follow. And ultimately, I want to say, and I'm sure Walter would say this agrees, ultimately it's the father. As the father set example. Yes, mothers set examples, but ultimately, if the father walks with the Lord, if the father sets a godly example, the kids will follow. And so the father figure is important. Not that the mother isn't important, but in this area, fathers, it is in your ballpark. Um, God's value system. And that's real important. We need to look at what does God value and what's important and how we impart that. Spoiling our children, very big problem. Expectation and disappointment, how you deal with that. Positive, negative commands. Disciplining our children. And you do need to discipline your children. You cannot. And one of the things me and my wife said is if you don't discipline your children, you're going to pay for it in the future. So it's better to suffer a little bit now than suffer more later. Because if you don't discipline your kids when they're young, when they become teenagers, they will become a handful. And so it starts now. Um, Family devotions, and that's really important. You really should have a family devotions, and spend where your kids see you read the Bible, and they see you pray, and they see you, the father and mother talking about the Bible and Scripture, and talking to your kids about it. It really should be a family devotion. Doesn't have to be complex, doesn't have to be overwhelming, but it should be something that you should do with your kids. Ministering together as a family. And I like this. I think this is where, especially as you get to larger and mega churches, you really have a professional team that ministers. And unfortunately, that's one I think the one advantages of smaller churches is when you have a smaller church, even a medium church, it's still very much um, uh, layman led. You have the congregation active in ministries, and because of that, it allows families to minister together, do ministries together. And you don't just send your kids to this room in the church, and the parents go to that room in the church, or the teenagers go over there. No, no, you say we're going to minister together, and I think that is an important point that unfortunately not a lot of stuff talks about nowadays. Education and discipline process and setting family goals. And you do need to have goals as a family. One of the things I have said, and is too often we don't have a goal for when our children are raised up. What do they want them to look like? What do you want them to know? What are the skills you want to know? What do you want them to know about God? What kind of relationship do you want with them? And you need to have idea where you're going, how you're discipling kids. Because if you don't set a goal, you can't get there. And the same thing happens in the church. Too many ministries are very aimless of what they're trying to do, and they do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and no one comes to full maturity because we don't have a goal. What do we want them to reach? And so that's really good. But anyways, I'll finish this up real quick. So, how to make how to disciple your children by Walter Henrichsen. Highly recommend it. I also highly recommend his other book, Disciples Are Made, Not Born. Really great book. Really challenges us about what discipleship. And that book is so popular, they just keep on reprinting it. I would love it if they do it this book too, but we'll have to wait and see. But if you guys go out, go buy some and share it with your friends. I'm sure we can get them to start reprinting that book as well. But again, How to Disciple Your Children by Walter Henrichsen. Highly recommend it. Go on Amazon, buy it, buy a used copy, whatever it is, get it, you'll read it. I promise you'll love it and it will really minister to your heart as a parent. And for those in youth ministry or children ministry, it'll be good for you to hear it too. Maybe share it with some of the parents in your the youth or the children ministry. I really like it. So have a nice day and God bless.